Rise and shine.
And we are back with our Tuesday's edition of Rise and Shine. And for those who are tuning in, we want to wish you a very good morning while wishing you a happy 72nd Independence Day. And as Sri Lankans, today's a day that we express the ideas of independence, sovereignty, and freedom, all this terminology, but it goes beyond law, it goes beyond policy and all physical attributes. It is also something that is associated with the state of mind. How many of us have the privilege of being free but walk as prisoners because of the way we think? And to talk more about it on a profound level, we have with us a very special personality. He is an astrophysicist, a Sri Lankan scholar in astronomy and archaeology, Dr. Kavan Ratnatunga. A very good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you on a special day like this, on a special edition like this.
Thank you for the invitation.
And Doctor, diving into the topic, freedom of thought. You know, being free is something that we always put on paper. It's something that we want to see and experience. But most of us are actually imprisoned with our thoughts and certain limitations of our mind. So to start off with, what exactly do you see as freedom?
I think I will start with the statement that was made by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, which is the Kalama Sutra, which basically tells you that one should not accept anything without thinking about it and understanding that it is real and it is good. So the Kalama Sutra, I'm sure everybody, all of you all must have read it at some point. Unfortunately, most of the Buddhists in Sri Lanka don't follow it. I think there are more non-Buddhists who follow it than Buddhists. So I think this was published by Abraham Kaur, who started the Sri Lanka Rationalist movement, which is a movement which was started in the 1960s. The movement is still going on. We have monthly meetings of the Rationalist Society. And those people there are very free to talk. The other freedom that we get is from the Sri Lankan Constitution. The 10th paragraph says, every person is entitled to freedom of thought, consciousness and religion, including the freedom to have and adopt a religion and belief of his choice. Now the problem is that, what if I don't have a religion? That says, specifically assumes that everybody has a religion. Now I am somebody who doesn't have a religion. I don't consider Buddhism a religion. I consider it a philosophy, even though 99% of the Sri Lankans consider it a religion. Right. So that case, I have a problem is that I am told that I can't give an affidavit. A lawyer told me I can't give an affidavit without stating my religion. So I go to the police station. Now he asked me, Sinhala Bauddhada? I said, Lankika Nirragamika, right, which I think is a reasonable thing to say. After explanation of what Nirragamika for about 15 minutes, he accepts the notion of Nirragamika, but he refused to put Lankika. He thought I was suppressing information. On evidence, when I go to give evidence in court, first thing I'm asked, what's your religion? I told the secretary, I don't have a religion. Nata. The secretary didn't much appreciate that answer, sort of put it up to the judge whether that was an acceptable answer. Luckily the judge was a bit more intelligent and accepted the answer of that I don't have a religion. But when it comes to the census, they ask you for your religion. You say none, they want to put you down under other, which is not correct because other means something else. So there is no official recognition on the constitution in Sri Lanka or in a lot of countries in the world, including the United States, I think, where you can say that you don't have a religion. And I think that is one of the things, freedoms, which we should put into our constitution if we are getting a new constitution at any point, is the thing of or not, a belief of religion or not, because that is not accepted this thing. And I think that is an important point, because you should have the free. We are scientists, so I mean, most of us who are scientists don't have a religion.
Yes, Doctor. And with that, let's talk a bit about freedom of expression, especially on this day of independence. People don't necessarily realize that they do have a freedom of expression.
Right. In the Constitution, in the 10th thing, it says in the 14th, one says every citizen is entitled to the freedom of speech, expression, including publication. Right. This was sort of adopted in 78, but I think that freedom is there, but there are certain things that one is not allowed to say on television. Luckily, your program is the first program that gave me the freedom when I came last time in July 30th. Freedom that I was allowed to talk about things that I was not even allowed to talk about on Yatharupa, which was another program that I came on, because that was done in Sinhala. And if it is done in Sinhala, there are certain things that you are not supposed to speak about, because they feel that there will be problems with the others.
That's true.
So I'm happy that we have a program here that we can talk about lots of topics.
It's pleasure. The pleasure is ours to definitely share these thoughts with you. And also, Doctor, talking about in school systems especially, we see that usually we are taught to think that making mistakes is wrong. Experimenting is wrong. A lot of people are afraid to, like, even when a teacher would teach something, we would always someone who would try to oppose would be seen as a child who is arrogant, who's not out there, who doesn't play it safe. But how important is it to doubt the conventional information that's given to us?
I think we are, in our genes, is a thing to accept what our parents say when we are kids. Because if genetically, going back to the time we were sort of in the animal kingdom sort of evolving, if you didn't accept what your parent as a deer, say the deer is just born, and didn't accept absolutely what your parents say, then you basically got eaten by the tiger. So the people who survived are the ones who actually was learned or genetically evolved to accept what your parents say. And that is true for us after humans as well. When we are born, we absorb anything that our parents say, and therefore, if at childhood we are told of a lot of things, maybe religion, maybe other things, astrology, whatever, we have a tendency of getting indoctrinated with these thoughts, and therefore take them sometimes to when we are old as well. I know of scientists who believe in religion very strongly, and so they keep their religion and their scientific research independent of each other, and they were two things. One may be contradicting each other, but they believe in both, because at childhood, once you are indoctrinated in a certain belief system, then you have it for life, unless you can break free, which everybody cannot do that. And I think that not being indoctrinated at childhood is very important. Now, my parents didn't indoctrinate me, so I'm free to think whatever I like, whereas a lot of parents sort of put their children into a particular religious set or whatever. And this is why I'm sort of even against Buddhist monks samaneras being made monks at age of 4 years, 5 years. And I think that's a tradition. Unfortunately, then Vinaya Pitaka says that you can be made a samanera if you can chase a crow, which is an interesting fact which not of people don't know, but sort of that says that you are 4 years old and can chase a crow, that you can be made. But that's wrong, because that kid who can just chase a crow does not understand enough to take the aspect of becoming a monk the whole of his life. And I think that you are curtailing the freedom of that person. I mean, if he decides that when they are adults or at least 15, 16 years to become a monk, that's good. But to really sort of do it at childhood, I think it's as bad as we are complaining about madrasas and whatever, but we are doing the same thing in the Buddhist world as well.
Definitely something to think about. It's a new perspective. And also, Doctor, I would like to know, on the Day of Independence, we are still embracing remnants of colonization. We haven't, getting independence is not something that we got 100% because there are certain lifestyles, certain value systems that are still remaining. And also with this, we have developed, as developing nations, we have developed this inferiority complex to always, see us as the second best to nations that conquered or the nations that are beyond us. So, but there's so much of value that even the Western nations seek in us. So how can we actually see beyond this, think openly, embrace our culture, embrace our music, embrace our food, embrace our clothing? It has to come to that point of thinking where we know that there's a beauty in actually being sovereign in the state of mind. How can we kind of approach that?
We are stuck. We have a lot of colonial influence, right? I don't come in suit or tie, and I have been fortunate to be in a field where I have not worn suit or tie since 1982, because at that point I decided, we are from the Asian countries, we shouldn't be imitating the West and wearing suit and tie. I can know how many times I got into trouble because of that, of going to weddings and various things without wearing suit tie, right? I've been pulled up, you are not giving the proper respect to the people who are going because you are not wearing full shoes. I wear sandals and go. And I think we should be free. There is no reason. If you take the West is appreciating us more than the East. They are coming out. They are from the West. They are coming to India. They are coming to Sri Lanka, and they are exploring because they are seeing the field. We have an older culture, but we think about the sort of the culture of that developed in the West, maybe from the 1500s, because that's when the Renaissance and everything and the developments happened in the West, right? Whereas if you take equivalent to us, we had that culture back 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. We had that thing, but I guess Sri Lanka has been under the colonial powers, the European powers since 1505, and therefore we feel that we have to imitate them to things to get accepted.
Especially we spoke about the influence that parents have on children,
yes.
How they are supposed to abide by everything that the parents tell them, and even their thought patterns are actually directed by the parents. And even if you go to school, we have a school system where you don't have entire freedom to think on your own. The factor of individual autonomy is missing in people from a younger age as well. So what are the things that the school systems can do, or even parents can do, to promote free thought in a child?
I think one thing is, the religion which is taught in thing. Now, those days, I can't remember whether it is so now, religion was considered a compulsory subject. I can remember I failed Buddhism in my O-level and was obliged to sort of cram it up and get through the next year because it was considered a compulsory subject. Whereas if they talk about teach philosophy, sort of general thing, the person would be free and understand all the religions, maybe even rationalism and sort of not having a religion as well, and then decide for that person. Because if you indoctrinate that person in a specific mindset, which is most often in this country is religion, then you have that for the rest of the life. And when you are small, as I explained, you soak up things much more than if you are and so when you get that at childhood, you believe that for the rest of your life. And I think that is what there should be freedom to teach people to think freely.
That's true. And also, Doctor, we see we need to focus on the youth power at this point, because there's a lot of evolution that's happening within the youth community, and they have these ways of expressing that we have never seen before. It includes unhealthy ways, which includes destructing public property, protesting, and doing a lot of other things. So freedom of expression is a beautiful thing. However, there are so many good ways you can do it, as well as not so good ways. What is your take on that?
No, I think there are limits. Certainly you can't be completely free that you can do whatever you want. There's social norms, culture. Culture gives you certain norms that you have to work within, and I think the laws of the land also gives you certain things because they are done for the good as long as they are not destructive. But now recently, if you take the Colombo, people have been painting on the walls, right? Graffiti, right? Or it can call it graffiti. That was not permitted those days, but now it became a cultural event about 6 months ago. We have paintings coming up all over the walls in Colombo, which is good because some kids are sort of using it positively to decorate artistic form. Unfortunately, there is a sort of a bad of it as well because there is a certain racial element in a lot of the paintings, and it is sad that it unfortunately allows that sort of racial element to come out, and I think that shouldn't have been permitted. But still, that is the freedom of expression, and I think everybody does it all thing. But certainly, the destructive part of things should not be permitted, and we should have, that is also part of the education. Educate people, don't make people believe in certain strong beliefs that will end up for them to do extremist activity.
It's true. And also, Doctor, to walk the talk is not easy. I mean, talking about it as, practice is the challenging component. So from your professional perspective, how can a person train their mind to actually think outside the box, to think openly, to think for themselves?
I think that is basically, you have to be not to have been indoctrinated. I think the parents have a certain responsibility of letting the kids sort of decide for themselves what they want to believe. If you indoctrinate them when they are small, that's the issue. So hopefully maybe if the parents don't do it, then the school system should be established in a way that it doesn't indoctrinate kids into a particular life theme. So if you change the curriculum and have a more open thing, replace religion with thing, because religious education is not supposed to be necessarily done in schools, right? In the US and the West, there is a separation of state and religion. So the religious education can be done in the Dhamma school or in the Sunday school or whatever. But within the school system, it is not taught.
Let's talk about
how Buddha has
taught us to support free thinking. How
yes,
we can
because that
train
is
ourselves.
right in what I started right at the beginning, the Kalama Sutra, which basically says don't accept anything on what on what is told by your elders or told by him, or and to basically study it and understand it and talk about it and decide to go yourself whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Of course, you have to be guided. I mean, he considered himself a teacher, and he guided the people as to how to think properly with the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. I mean, that is a part of Buddhism and is the philosophy of Buddhism. Unfortunately, over the last 2,000 years, Buddhism has become a religion. You go and pray and do pujas to trees when that was explicitly forbidden. Right? In the first 500 years, there were not a single Buddha statue made because it was forbidden to make a Buddha statue. It was forbidden to worship trees, right? And what was only thing that was available in a temple was his footprints. And you looked at his that was the representation of him was just the footprints. So you find in the oldest archaeological remains just the Buddha's footprints, symbolizing that he is there and to think of what he taught, but not a physical picture. Now we have sort of Buddha rupas starting up in every corner of every street, which is actually an insult because it's not Buddhism. So I think we have to go back to the original teachings of the Buddha, which sort of is basically very aligned to the scientific thought and the rationalist thought, which is what even Abraham Kaur, now he was a rationalist, he didn't accept any religion, but in his book he did start with putting a Buddha statue in the first page and the Kalama Sutra in the second page, and even 10 Commandments by Bertrand Russell, which is a different 10 Commandments in the third, because that is the freedom of thought. Bertrand Russell was one of in the cover page, of course, has Bertrand Russell as well. is one of the people who is advocating free thought. I mean, which is there. Now it is sort of continued by people like Dawkins and people talking about it. But there is too much of organized religion, which is constraining us freedom of speech. But the younger generation, I think the internet has opened up a huge thing of getting information from everywhere. You are not restricted to getting information from your parents or whatever. You can go on the internet, explore the world and get. So I think now we have come to a stage where we can get the required information to anybody who is interested in looking. So I think if you stop indoctrinating them, they will find the correct information. Unfortunately, internet also has some problems because there is a lot of as much false information on the internet as there is true information. You can find websites which talk about the fact that the earth is flat or all the conspiracy theories about things, but that is unfortunately reality. So one has to learn to separate the reality from the fake news, as they say.
It's true. And also, beyond institutionalized thoughts, we also see superstition as a primal part in our culture. And on a neutral route, we would like to ask you, what is your take on how we can combat certain indoctrinated superstitions? Because a lot of youngsters are very concerned beyond their capacity. They're concerned about a lot of issues like that. So, from your educational perspective, how can we combat negative impacts on superstition?
Okay, if you take, I think one of the biggest negative impacts is given by astrology. Basically because I have sort of written articles proving that it has no scientific basis at all. I'm an astronomer and I know the framework of astrology. But astrology is ingrained in our system. People don't get out of the house at certain times because it is the wrong time of the day. But on the other hand, it's partly cultural, right? If we only adopt the cultural part of it, then I think we have no problem, because it is nice to have a certain cultural belief, and whether it is not set up on a scientific basis, it's okay. It's a cultural norm. I know. I went for a program in the public library where I was taking the scientific view, and before I talked, there was this astrologer who got up. And he was a very rational person who looked at astrology entirely on a cultural basis. And he told me about the incident of how he was in Gampaha and a couple were getting married. And the husband has been told to leave Kandy at a certain time and come to Gampaha. Only the astrologer had given only 1 hour's time. So unless he took a helicopter, he wouldn't have got to Gampaha in an hour. So the whole family was distraught because the husband has not come in time for the ceremony. So he explained. He said, I managed to explain to the bride's parents that the astrologer in Kandy had got the time wrong and that the correct time was some other thing. And he said he made peace, that he gave enough time for the bridegroom to come down for the wedding. And he said everything was happy after that because the bride's side was okay. But that is, after I talked after that, there was another astrologer who came and blackguarded both of us. For me for sort of talking against it, and the other astrologer for being far more sort of relaxed about all these rules and taking it purely on a cultural basis. And I think that is what we need to do. We can't have these things telling us to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day to have cook a meal and to eat at 5 o'clock in the morning. It won't happen. I was there at one of those meetings just as an observer, and when this came up, the rest of the astrologers said, this is not a rational thing, and sort of got it stopped and had it at a reasonable time, that we had lighted the hearth at 6 o'clock and ate at 7 o'clock, which was a more reasonable thing. Unfortunately, just before the New Year, there was all these astrologers who went and said that the time was wrong and various things, and then some incident happened after the New Year, and they blamed it all on the fact that a wrong time was selected. All nonsense, because We know a lot of astrologers have predicted that if you go for election on a certain date, that you will 100% win. It didn't happen.
Definitely. I think there's more of it's important to retain the cultural aspect of it and not let it hamper productivity.
Yeah, because there are certain people are not allowed to get married because of stupid astrological beliefs. That is crazy. I mean, two people love each other and not allowed to get married because some astrologer says you can't do it. I mean, if you look at the statistics, I'm sure the people whose astrology work, I'm sure those marriages break much more often than the
It's all about the decisions.
It's the belief system. If you believe,
Definitely.
I tell you, it is like no different to belief in God or anything. If you believe it, it will influence you to a certain extent, because the power of the mind over belief. So if the power of the mind is having belief in something and therefore you get strength, that is one way. But if the power of the mind is, free think, you will get a different strength.
And thank you so much, Doctor, for that. Just imagine the amount of power you have over your thoughts. Just imagine channeling that energy to believe in yourself, in your actions, in your thoughts, in your behaviors. The world will be definitely an amazing place. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Kavan Ratnatunga, for joining with us and bringing a very refreshing, a new tone to the table. This is something that we don't often discuss.